Tired of bloating, fatigue and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delayed release capsules, real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Thursday's episode of Trending. Today, I'm going to be talking about the UK government trying to sneak digital ID for children in through the back door. We're also going to talk about the Israel-Hamas peace deal and the fact that now it appears the gun sites are moving to China. Welcome to today's episode of Trending, brought to you in association with NutriHealth 365. The link is in the description below. Let's start off in the UK, but do you know what? It's a global thing, so actually, if it doesn't apply to your country now, it will do soon. UK digital ID for children being snuck in through the back door. Here we go. Labour are seeking to sneak this childhood digital ID in while everyone's focusing on the digital ID for adults announcement by Zippy from Rainbow Chairman Starmer. And of course, we need to focus on that. Absolutely. Hopefully people are going to just keep talking about it, keep doing outreach across the country, explaining to people that aren't aware already, why this is such a bad thing. And hopefully we'll get some huge numbers in London on the 18th of October to make a real statement to the government. Now, while we're doing that, while we're focusing on that, as of course we need to, they're kind of coming round the other way, as they often do. One of the real red flags, and there's two red flags with this, one I'll come to later, but the first one I'll say before I choke is there's no media coverage of this. So that's already a red flag. When you look at other legislation, I'm going to drink some coffee before I start coughing and spluttering. And now it's burnt my throat because it's way too hot. So that's a good start. The fact that the media goes complete silent, radio silence on something is a red flag. Because what it means is they don't want any scrutiny. Because it won't stand up to scrutiny because these things never do. So this is actually from a guy called Simon Squibb, who I think basically is essentially a life coach, a very successful one. He's got, millions and millions and millions of people that he's helping in terms of his life coach business, but he's done a really good breakdown of this children's wellbeing and schools bill, which is how they're sneaking in this digital ID. So this is his breakdown of it. The government's new children's wellbeing and schools bill sounds harmless. I actually think it sounds quite Orwellian, but Simon thinks it sounds harmless, but it's not. Didn't think it would be. It gives the state sweeping control over your child's life, their data, which, let's have it right, ladies and gentlemen, is now the currency of the globe, and it's the currency of control, data, that's for sure, and your right to decide how they're educated and cared for. Now, they were always gonna target children first, ladies and gentlemen, because this is what they do. Because they can try and do it in a way that, one, it goes through in a bill. If it goes through, it's actually in the Lords at the moment being debated. If it goes through in a bill that actually on the face of it has nothing to do with digital ID. It's not like the digital access data bill or whatever, where the clue's kind of in the name and people are going to look at that and go, hang on, what's this? Children's well-being. Well, who doesn't want that, right? And that's how they do it. It's the same with the online safety bill. If they put a bill forward, which is basically, this is the Labour Party. Well, it was actually the Conservative Party that started it, but it's a uni party, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to put through the Shut Your Flaming Mouth bill, right? We're going to put that through Parliament. And what that does is it basically just says, shut up, everyone that's trying to expose what we're up to. I'm not sure that'd get through. So they called it the online safety bill because we need to protect kids online, right? Of course, it's not what it's about. So that's how they do it. So here's what's really inside the bill. A digital ID for every child, a government-controlled identifier linking data across schools, health services, are you vaccinated? Local authorities, even police. There's no way to opt out. There's never a way to opt out, is there? Because that's what happens in a free society. No parental control over who sees it and how it's used. This is the data, of course. Parental rights removed. Well, they've always wanted to do that. Key decisions about your child's education could shift from you to the state. Of course, this is the plan. It's straight from Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where essentially the state raises the kids. You don't. And to be fair, they kind of already do in many ways. But they want, to dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of that. Like, essentially, so you just become the conduit that brings the child into the world, and then we'll take it from here. And actually, I'll be honest with you, folks, that's not where they want it to end. You only need to read Brave New World and see, where he's talking about his state hatcheries and all that kind of stuff. They're telling you what they want. In the end, they don't want people procreating in what would be a natural way. And you look at plummeting sperm counts across the world, particularly across the Western world, we're not a million miles away from that, ladies and gentlemen. Local authorities would determine what constitutes a suitable education. Not thinking. Kids not thinking for themselves. Not being exposed to information that the state doesn't pre-sanction. That's what that means. State mind control, basically, ladies and gentlemen. A loss of confidentiality. Sensitive family information could be shared without your consent. SEN and vulnerable children hit the hardest. The same councils that lose 95% of SEND tribunal cases would have even more power. No one can have confidentiality. One, because you can't have if you're going to be part of a digital ID social credit system, because the whole point of it is that they know exactly what you're doing, what you're consuming, where you're going, who you're talking to, what you're saying, even what you're thinking, ladies and gentlemen, in order to administer the good little boy and girl score or the bad little boy and girl score. It's honest, it's insane. But people forget as well, ladies and gentlemen, right? Mate, this is good coffee, actually. People forget that you will own nothing and you'll be happy, right? That's a World Economic Forum slogan. You hear it quoted all the time. I've quoted it many, many times. But it's not the full quote. You will own nothing. God, I went common then, didn't I? Nothing. You'll own nothing. You'll own nothing. You'll have no privacy. And you'll be happy. So when people quote it, myself included, I'm not digging anyone out, we kind of forget that the no privacy part is key. And that's what this is about as well. They could veto flexible learning options essential for anxious, autistic, or trauma-affected children. So basically, home education then. Because if they bring the bill in where they can veto flexible learning, therefore they can veto you learning from home, then that's for everyone. Even if you don't home educate now, this bill could remove the chance to do it in the future. They don't want kids learning at home. They don't want that. Now, they kind of walked a bit of a tightrope during the whole COVID nonsense, because what they did is they closed schools for all but the most vulnerable and children of essential workers, whatever the hell that ever meant, as if your job's not essential if it pays the mortgage. But anyway, that was their terminology, wasn't it? So other kids were learning from home. So they were doing a great job of isolating kids and separating them from their friends, causing depression and mental health problems, winning on that front. But the other thing they did was they had children exposed to other things. So kids were around their parents having conversations. Parents could see what the kids were being taught, and they didn't like it, a lot of it. So a lot more conversations came out of it, and a lot more interest was paid by parents, who, to be fair, a lot of them just farm their kids off to school and let the state do their programming and don't actually have any input or conversation about it. Not so much as, what did you learn today? expect intrusive reporting, here we go, and oversight for any family choosing a different path. So those families that see through the nonsense, or maybe don't even see through the nonsense, but maybe they're slightly more spiritual, maybe a hippie family, for instance, that might go, oh no, I kind of want to go down this road in terms of education. Well, no, if the state doesn't sanction it, that's not right. It's not going to happen. Yeah, but it's not your kid. This bill says different. They'll threaten to take kids off people, by the way, as well, 100%. And they can create, false claims and accusations. They can suggest that you're dangerous. They don't need any evidence for it in order to, even if they don't actually physically take the kids off you, they can use them to get the parent under that threat to just go along with stuff. And I would get it. If someone threatens to take your kid off you, yeah, all right, fine. I'll go along with this then. So you'll find that lots of people that maybe would have gone down a different path of education, maybe they would have homeschooled, or maybe they would have flexi-schooled, gone in a couple of days a week, but then taught at home the rest or whatever, won't do that now once this bill goes through, if it goes through. They won't do it because it's too much of a risk. I'll keep my head down because I don't want the state to get involved in my family life any more than they already have. And we're actually seeing that just this week because nothing happens by accident, and the timing of stuff is always very, very important and very, very significant to the end goal. Even Chairman Starmer announcing digital ID at a time when everyone was divided. That wasn't an accident. That was the behavioural insights team and their equivalents within the permanent government in Whitehall going, if they come together and oppose it, we got a problem. Well, they hate each other at the minute. Bang, introduce it now. So timing is key. So with that in mind, just in the last couple of days, the state propaganda arm, the BBC, and when I say the state propaganda arm, people go, well, no, they're left wing or they're right wing, depends who you ask. No, they work for the permanent government, mate. So they essentially work as a propaganda mouthpiece for the permanent government, no matter who's in charge in terms of the name above the door of Downing Street. That don't matter. I think Chairman Starmer's making these decisions. Guy's a complete doofus. So the BBC have come out in the last couple of days with an article where they're targeting Kate Shimrani. They've been targeting relentlessly, for years actually. And the usual Mariana Spring, disinformation expert is taking the lead on it. And basically the article says, how do we protect our kids from conspiracy theorist parents? I don't know, let the state take them off the parents, I suppose. That's a good idea, isn't it? Yeah, let's go for it. So the fact that this is all happening at the same time and our gaze is diverted is not an accident. Now, I'll give you an example of this, how they use this child services stuff, right? And it's a personal story. So during the COVID nonsense, obviously I was massively outspoken and was speaking across the country at protests and all that kind of stuff. And my then 2-year-old was kicked out of nursery school because she wasn't welcome because I was attending these protests. So, I was being targeted in this sense, but it got really dark. Now, it wasn't the first time. So even before COVID, but not much before, a couple of months before it kicked off, to be fair, my little one was poorly. And so in the end, as a first-time parent as I was, panicking, I, took her into a walk-in centre with my wife, and the doctor seemed friendly enough, but when it got to she's not had her vaccinations conversation, he turned, and then he ended up reporting us because he'd found a bruise, to which the next day social services came round. I'm at that point actually going through surgery, so I, got knocked out for my surgery, not knowing what I was going to wake up to in terms of whether I was going to wake up to a message from my wife saying they've taken her. It was horrendous. Luckily, when social services came around, number one, they couldn't find a bruise because there wasn't one, right? The guy just made it up. And he'd also made up a load of other stuff about the fact that she was crawling around, and so he couldn't explain how she'd got this bruise that didn't exist. And the social services officer sat there looking at my daughter who's walking around the room, right? She's not crawling, she's walking. Bumping into, coffee tables and all sorts. So even if there was a bruise, which there wasn't, there would have been an excuse for one. So in the end, actually, they wrote a letter to the doctor, basically seeing if, they asked us if we wanted to bring action against him. But it was a horrendous situation to be put through and, not very pleasant. And what it does is it makes you it makes some people kind of go, I've got to keep my head down then. I'm not going to rock the boat. Obviously, I'm not one of those people. So then the COVID stuff happened and I came out and was giving it the big one. So then, I don't put pictures of my kids on social media for this reason, to be honest. That this is what they want. They want to harvest all this data and all these images and stuff. And, there's some nut jobs out there, so I don't do that. But when our second child was born during lockdown, I put just one picture up of our eldest, who was 3, holding, brand new baby. Well, that was a mistake. So I put this picture up, and then a couple of days later, I'm swimming with our eldest, and my wife is holding the baby in the cafe overlooking the swimming pool. Now, at this time, her dad had been a bit poorly, so I come up, and her face is, ashen. And she says, I've just received a phone call. And I'm thinking, oh, mate, is he all right? What's happened? Child services. So someone, and I need to phone them. So I go outside and I phone the number I've been told to phone, and I speak to this lady who thankfully was lovely. And it transpires that someone, whether it's a member of the public who's a complete scumbag or whether it's someone higher up, I don't know. They've gone through the NSPCC, which is supposed to be a charity that protects children. There's more to know about all these organizations. Of course, there always is. Saying that basically, because of my anti-vax views, I'm a threat to my kids. Now, thankfully, at that point, that wouldn't have even been a conversation starter. But then they threw in the fact that I was controlling, that I was aggressive, and all this kind of other stuff. And so that led the NSPCC to then go to Child Services, who then came to us. They phoned my wife, said to her, are you on your own? Basically, is this person around? And she said, yeah. Why? And obviously they said what they said about the complaint. And they said that, we've been told he's quite aggressive and violent and controlling, to which she started laughing because that ain't the dynamic in my house, right? So I phoned the lady. We have a conversation. They basically reported me as a neighbor, but they didn't know where I lived. You think you'd know where your own house is, wouldn't you? So in the end, it was basically thrown out, and she basically was, asking me if I was all right, because obviously I was a bit shaken by it. And they put, a note on my file to say basically this guy is, because of his views online, is a target for people to create these kind of, false scenarios and claims and whatever. But it was a horrendous situation. Now, that was before any kind of legislation like this is put in place to specifically, for the state to specifically target. For whatever view, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to necessarily be, anti-vax. It can be anti-war. My dad was supposed to speak at an anti-war rally in the Netherlands. He's been banned from Europe for 4 years. So you don't necessarily have to do something wrong to be targeted. And in fact, it's often the opposite of that. Now, I said earlier, obviously, there was 2 red flags. The first one being that there's no media coverage of this. We're talking about this online, and this guy, Simon Squibb, is he's breaking it down as a life coach. He's not the mainstream media. So that's a huge red flag. They're not talking about it. They just want it to sneak through into legislation without us scrutinizing it. The other thing is, there's been a petition. And just like the petition with digital ID, which is in above 3 million, I think now, there's been a government response. Now, with the digital ID petition, the response is contemptible. It's basically, yeah, we've seen your petition. That's a lot of people, isn't it? Yeah. We're doing it anyway. Now bugger off. That's essentially the response. And now with this one, now the numbers are just above 135,000 signatures, which just goes to show in a country of 70 odd million, just how little coverage this bill has had. But still, after 100,000, the government has to not only respond, but they have to debate it. So we'll see where that goes. I'm sure it will be the last debate of the day when on a Friday when all the MPs have all buggered off back to their weekend homes and no one's really saying anything about it, and it's not getting any real, genuine questioning and scrutiny. But here's the response, right? Now, bearing in mind their response against the digital ID petition, how contemptible and arrogant that was. So this petition, over 135,000 signatures saying to basically overturn the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and explains why in terms of everything I've just explained in the last 20 minutes or whatever. This is the response. The Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill puts in place a package of support to drive high and rising standards throughout our education and care systems so that every child can achieve and thrive. That's it. So they're not addressing concerns. They're saying, this is going through, son. This is what it's going to do, and you're going to have it. It's a politician's answer, where it doesn't act. Yeah, you've already said that in the legislation, what you're saying it will do. We're just saying we've read the small print. So they just repeat it again, completely contemptible. So whilst we should be focusing on digital ID, ladies and gentlemen, keep an eye on this and oppose it. And, sign that petition. I'll put the petition in the description. Sign it. I understand, people out there saying petitions don't make a blind bit of difference. And, it's basically begging the government, essentially. I get it. I get it. But sometimes, you have to kind of use their tools, essentially, to make a point. And we'll see where that goes. But that's the end of this, social section, I guess, because the rest of it's free on Iconic, but that's the end of this bit. If you want to watch the rest of the episode, head over to iconic.com. The direct link to that is in the description. We're going to talk about the Israel-Gaza peace deal, and we're going to be talking about China as well, and how basically the gun sites are aiming there now.